This bridge makes no sense. There's not even water here. What? Why? Why even have a bridge? What? Like, it didn't, nothing changed. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Vibing Out with Texony. I'm your host with the most, Texony, aka Mr. WorldVibe. What we have here is a community to give local voices a public platform of shared ideas, knowledge, and perspectives. Welcome back to the podcast, guys. It's been a while since I've been here to talk to you, and I'm so excited. This is a big episode because I'm sharing my experiences in going across Canada, driving across the country, experiencing all this nation has to offer. Well, I went from Ontario to Banff, so most of the country. I visited a few different provinces and I've seen the different terrains, I've seen different cultures, and so I have so much to talk about here. So I'm really excited to get started. Before we start, just make sure you are following the podcast. Make sure you're subscribed. Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Make sure you're following on Instagram at VibingOutWT, Twitter, TikTok. I'm all over, everywhere there. So just make sure you're tapped in, okay? And yeah, I've been very excited to make this episode. Kind of nervous too. I've really been kind of just waiting. I've been back for about a week now, and I did wait a while. It took me a while to get, I guess, out of vacation mode. I've been in vacation mode since I've been back. I was gone for 10 days. And so coming back took a while to really get fully ready to explain how everything went. But I'm glad I waited because everyone I talked to kept asking how was the trip. And I got a sense of kind of the questions people wanted to ask, the things people were curious about. I got a chance to get a feel for that because I talked to a lot of people since I've been back. So I feel like I have a better sense of what you listening want to hear. I hope I can answer your questions and clear up some of your, concerns or inquiries when it comes to considering traveling the country. Going on a road trip across Canada is a long road trip. It's basically the furthest you'd realistically drive anywhere in North America. Because the furthest you could go is BC, and I almost went there. If you were to drive south through the U.S., I don't know how far you'd probably go to California would be the furthest, which is basically the same distance that I did. So, preparing for a road trip of this size is not easy. And going across Canada is not easy. It was not necessarily easy, but it was worth it. So yeah, I hope I can clear up some of your questions or your kind of just, things that you're curious about. So I hope this episode helps for people who are interested in that. Otherwise, if you just care about me as a person and you want to know how I enjoyed it, I'll talk about that as well. Made some notes and I'm ready to share everything. So yeah, where can we start? I was planning this out. That's the number one thing I can tell you is I planned this out, right? I took my SUV, right? I wanted to make sure I went in a comfortable car. I made sure I planned out Airbnbs across so I could make sure I have enough time to get there. You check Google Maps and see how long it would take you. You factor in a few hours added on to make stops. We stopped every 2.5 hours because, you can't just drive all the way without stopping. And I also made sure I factored in things like, the time change. You're going back 2 hours and you're coming back to Ontario 2 hours forward. And I didn't want to drive at night, which I ended up doing in some situations, but you don't really want to drive at night. You want to drive in the daytime because there's so much to look out for. When it comes to your route, when it comes to animals on the road and different rain, there was fire. There's different elements you have to watch out for. So you don't want to make nighttime another element added on. You want to just do the driving in the morning and the afternoon, maybe the evening if you have to. Okay, so yeah, let's start. I left June 3rd, which was a Saturday. First day we went from Ontario, Brampton, to Thunder Bay. So that would have been we probably got to Thunder Bay at 9 p.m. That was an all-day drive. And then we left at 4:35 a.m. So the first day, Thunder Bay is still Ontario, right? So the first day you're still in Ontario. It's a huge province when you drive around the lakes, like north, around all the lakes, especially Lake Superior. You're going through that around that big lake. So first day, like 15 hours in the car. And so the second day was Thunder Bay to Regina, Saskatchewan. So we got a chance to leave Ontario and go through Manitoba, which is the next province over for those who aren't, I guess, sharpened up on their Canadian geography here. I mean, I don't know everything, but I do know the provinces, So yes, second day, you go from Ontario. We went through Manitoba, and my goal was to just get the hell out of Manitoba. For some reason, I had this preconceived notion in my mind that Manitoba is not a place that I want to be in. And I Googled it. I went on Quora Digest. You guys know that search engine? And I was looking up, why is Manitoba bad? And people said online, there's so much construction, there's a lot of crime and poverty, and people just don't want to spend time there. Like, have you ever heard anybody say, "Oh, we're going to Manitoba for the weekend or for the week"? No one goes to Manitoba. So my goal was to get the hell out of there. But we did stop in the capital of Regina, of Manitoba, which is Regina. No, not Regina. Sorry, Winnipeg. Well, so many different cities here. Winnipeg is the capital of Manitoba. We stopped there, and most of Manitoba looked pretty much like it's just there's no one there. There's no one there. When you're on the highways, you don't really see much. But when you get into Winnipeg, it was decent in the city. I mean, there's a government building there. There was a building there. I think it was the Royal Canadian Mint, and it had a bunch of different flags across the world. So I think a lot of government officials go there. So that area was nice. But otherwise, it was not the nicest. There was a lot of construction, and no one was actually finishing the construction. It was just unpaved roads and cones all over the place. At least in Brampton and Toronto, there's construction, but people are doing it for the most part. In Manitoba, there's construction, but no one was doing it. There was I saw a lot of First Nations people too, a lot in Manitoba. I think a lot of First Nations folks live on reserves in Manitoba and also in the city. But there was a lot of, it just looked kind of poverty stricken, to be honest. It wasn't the nicest place to be in. I'm not hating on Manitoba, but I am. I just didn't want to be there. And so we stopped in Winnipeg just to get gas and chill for a bit. Driving out of Manitoba was a rainstorm. We hit a rainstorm. That shit nearly killed us. I'm telling you, this rain, we drove straight into the eye of a huge storm. So the rain was so intense, I had to pull over. I couldn't even see in front of me. I put my flashers on. When I'm driving looking in front, I could just see flashers of a car, but I couldn't see how close I was. So I pulled over. A lot of cars pulled over. But I was afraid if I was pulled over for too long, I would get hit from behind. So eventually I was like, man, I got to keep going through this or I'm never going to get out of the storm. So I was driving and just looking at the car in front of me, making sure I don't hit it because I couldn't see how far it was from me. That was like 20 minutes of just being scared and just hoping I could get out of that storm. I had to have no music on. I couldn't even film it, guys. I couldn't even take out my phone and film it. It was so intense. So that happened in Manitoba. I knew, deep down I knew I didn't want to be in Manitoba for too long and ended up almost dying there. But made it out. Okay, so then second day, made it through Manitoba and ended up in Regina, which is Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan is much like Manitoba. Not a lot of people there. But we stopped in Regina, which is the capital again. Is it the capital? Yes, it's the capital. And it was a nice city. It was nice. It was fine. It was fine. I'll say it was fine. The cities in the west or the middle of Canada, they're not huge. They're very small cities. It looks like Hamilton, Burlington, downtown Hamilton, downtown Burlington. They don't look big at all. There's really not a lot of people in Canada. Like, it's not dispersed evenly at all. So when you're in these cities in the I guess it's the prairies, right? When you're in the cities and the prairies and in these provinces, you definitely, I mean, it's not like a culturally diverse place. You feel like a tourist. You feel like an outsider. Yeah, I'm Canadian, so I feel like, okay, I'm Canadian, I'm here in Canada, but I don't know, I didn't really feel like I was at home. People were smiling and nice, but I could tell that they knew I was a tourist, and so I didn't really feel settled in. I really didn't. I felt like a little bit of unease, especially with the lack of like ethnic diversity, I should say. Wasn't a lot of that. So that's one big difference, just by stopping in some of these cities and seeing. But it is what it is, right? It's just a big difference from Ontario. Like, so it's so different from Ontario when you're driving across these provinces. As soon as I left the GTA and I was driving even in Ontario, people move over to the right lane. People don't drive fast. Nobody passed me on the entire drive to Banff and Jasper. Nobody drove past me. It got to the point where we were driving and there was this one truck. Okay, it was a big double trailer truck. You know, like a double trailer, and then both trailers were blue. So it was a very memorable truck. We passed the truck, pulled over to use the washroom and get gas, drove and passed the truck again. So, because everyone was just going at one pace the whole time. I passed the same cars again and again. No one was really going that fast. When you see people's plates and it says Manitoba, when you see people's plates and it says Saskatchewan, and we'll get to Alberta, I feel like people see me, the guy with the Ontario plate, and they move the hell over. Like, they move over so fast because they know I'm from Ontario, and I guess they know we don't play around. Like, we drive fast, we drive aggressive, we are fast paced in Ontario, which is such a contrast from the other side of the country. I'm telling you. So yeah, it's funny. It's very much difference in pace of life. That's the biggest difference, and that's the theme you're gonna hear me say again and again. So yeah, made it through to Regina, second night, and again that second day was another 14 hours of driving. So we're in the car again from like morning time all the way to like 9 p.m. Third day from Regina all the way out to Calgary. So we went from Saskatchewan to Alberta, which is right beside each other. It was less driving. That was about 8 hours of driving, 7 hours driving. That wasn't that bad. That was easy. That was an easy one. And yeah, Calgary, decent city. Okay, that's probably the nicest city we had been in since we left, because I guess Alberta has a little bit more potential of growth, and you see a lot of those I guess posters and billboards that are trying to attract people, saying like Alberta's calling, come to Alberta. Yeah, you could go there and it's nice, but you really do feel like you're in the middle of nowhere still. Like, it's not that large of a city. I looked up the population. It's just over 1 million. Like, I mean, Mississauga and Brampton alone combined, those two cities have more population than most of Calgary. Like, Calgary for sure, they surpass Calgary, and most surrounding areas. So not a lot of people there. I was even talking to people in Calgary, and they were saying that Edmonton's the same thing. They call it Deadmonton because it's dead there, because nothing's happening. So I really start to get the sense of, if I were to move to Calgary, I would have to have a very settled life. I would have to not expect to be doing much other than having the people closest to me, near me, and having a pretty chill life. Like, I would have to have my work there. I'd have to expect not a lot of social life. The best thing you could do is visit Vancouver or Banff or Jasper. They're not that far from Calgary, but yeah, otherwise you're probably going to take the plane go back to Ontario, you're not going to do that drive. That's a 2.5 day drive from there. Not easy. I wouldn't say you should do it back and forth. So yeah, if you're looking to go to Alberta, which a lot of people do, you have to prepare for a more chill life, a more settled life, and you have to kind of really sacrifice the pace of life. It's so much slower. Actually, from the different provinces, I realized people call you different things. So for example, going to Manitoba, they're called Tobers. Manitoba, Tobers. When you're in Saskatchewan, they call you Saskies. I'm from Saskatchewan, I'm a Sasky. When you're from Alberta, they call you Burtons or Birdies, right? Whatever is your choice. You know what they call us from Ontario? Pieces of shit. That's what they call us. That's what they call us. Apparently, I don't know. There's they see us as different. In Ontario, it's different. I'm telling you, it's so much different from these prairie provinces. But Alberta was nice. So finally, the 4th day, we went from Regina to Banff. Well, Canmore, which is a 20-minute drive out from Banff. And then we spent 4 days in this area. So Banff, 2 days near Banff, and 2 days north near Jasper. A place called Yellowhead County, which is about an hour north of Jasper. So near Jasper. So you can hang around Banff or Jasper. They're both in the Rocky Mountain area. And they're both beautiful. Whoa. Now, because I was on a road trip, I didn't really get a chance to do a lot of the tourist attractions there because I was only there for 2 days in Banff and 2 days for Jasper. So it's not a lot of time to really get, to experience everything. I mostly got a chance to see different sites, and then I had to keep it moving. It's only a 10-day trip. It's a lot of driving. When you're on a road trip, you're prioritizing the driving. And so I got a chance to do a hike near Jasper, like around the Jasper area. Not in Jasper, but north of there in some, nice forest area. And I got a chance to go on a bike ride in Banff. So I got a chance to bike ride and see some different animals and things like that. So yeah, you get a chance to see a few things. I stopped at Lake Louise, another popular tourist destination. The water is so blue. I don't even know how. It's just nice and blue that way. And yeah, so I got a chance to see a few things, but not everything. If you really want to experience Banff and Jasper fully, number one, I'd say fly over. Don't drive over. Listen, this road trip was not easy. Almost died a few times. The rainstorm I told you about, seeing animals on the road, and you see moose, you see deer, you see sheep and goats. You gotta watch out for animals. You gotta watch out for rainstorms. Clearly, I almost got caught in a forest fire right on the side of the road, but we'll get there. But I wouldn't say to do the drive if you want to visit Banff or Jasper. This is a once in a lifetime type of trip. You gotta plan it out. You gotta go with the right people so you're not bored or hate them at the end of the trip. But I would just say fly over, so you have more time to spend. You kind of want a good 4 or 5 days where you don't have to do a bunch of driving. You want to spend 4 or 5 days minimum in these areas. Banff and Jasper alone are 2 hours away from each other because you're driving through the entire Rocky Mountains. I drove up and down it, and it's a beautiful drive. Whoa. The different mountainscapes you see, the hills, the trees, it is so beautiful. Some of the trees you see are burnt from the forest fires. So I got lucky that I didn't go at a time where there were many forest fires. Banff and Jasper were beautiful. There were forest fires near where I was staying, north of Jasper. And luckily, on the very last day when I had to leave is when the forest fires were getting worse. So I wasn't affected by them. But when I tried to drive back home, I tried to drive past the forest fire. I thought it'd be fine. I was like, you know what? I see on the map forest fire right beside the highway, right beside the highway. I was like, yeah, no, the trees are beside the road, so it should be fine, right? Yeah, it was not. I had to turn around because somebody was stopping all the traffic and diverting us the other way because there's a forest fire. So yeah, I thought I could make it through one, but I didn't. And so yeah, definitely check out Banff and Jasper. So beautiful. I would recommend anybody in this country to go and visit that. I think it's the most beautiful part of this entire country in terms of the land, right? I was so fortunate to get to see the different landscapes of Canada. When you're in Ontario, you get to see a bunch of evergreen trees and rock formations. This is the Canadian Shield. That's what that area is called. Then you get to the prairies. It starts when you go through Manitoba. It starts getting more like less hills, more grass, and just flat. By Saskatchewan, it's just plains for hours, for days. And then slowly, as we drove in past Calgary towards the Rocky Mountains, you start to see the mountains in the distance, and then suddenly you're just immersed in them, and you just can't stop looking around and seeing how huge the mountains are. And it's amazing to see the country like landscape change as you go. I really felt like when I was driving there, like Canada is huge, way bigger than I thought it was. So that was really cool to get to see the country change, like seeing the landscape change as I go through it. And yeah, so that was the drive. Yeah, so long drive, 3 days basically. Almost died several times. So I'm saying make sure you plan everything out. I was so fortunate that I didn't run out of gas. One time I did, the very first time in Ontario, but I barely made it to the gas station with 0 kilometers left. So you got to make sure you plan it out. I keep saying that to you guys. Plan this out. Make sure you know where you're going to be staying. Make sure you're not doing any driving in the night. Like I told you, I was leaving in the mornings at 5 a.m., 6 a.m., 7 a.m. I was leaving early. So I had all morning and afternoon to drive. One other thing is I ended up using Google Maps. The best traffic app to use. I use Waze in the GTA here in Ontario, but when I left the GTA, I couldn't really use Waze because Waze is a user-friendly app. Like you have to report things as when you use it, but if there's no one in the province, no, you can't use Waze. So Google Maps is definitely the best to use. But yeah, I mean, guys, do the trip, do the road trip once in your life. You should do it one way. Don't do it both ways unless you love driving. I love driving. So for me, that was the best drive I've ever done in my whole life. It was tough, and I wouldn't recommend it to anybody who is not a very experienced driver, but I would not do it again. That's the truth. I would not do this drive twice. I would go out east. I would do a drive out east to the East Coast once and back. And just to finish, yeah, I drove back. Obviously, as I'm saying, drove back to Regina for the first night, and then from Regina, we went south through the U.S. We went through North Dakota, which is just south of Saskatchewan there. We went across Wisconsin, then Michigan, then Illinois, and stopped in Chicago. That was the longest day of driving, for sure. Left Regina in the morning, maybe 6 a.m. Did not get to Chicago. We drove through like a third of the U.S. We did not get to Chicago until 2 a.m. the next morning. It was like 19 hours in the car. So that was a long drive for sure. But you know how I got through these drives? First of all, not being alone. Second of all, having coffee. Oh man, iced coffees all the way. Drank so much coffee, it's fine. Caffeine, it's fine. Okay, it's good. A few snacks, you gotta have. I mean, I had a cooler with snacks. I did buy a bunch of snacks before I left, and so that was great. Having different snacks just to munch on as you're driving. You get pretty snacky when you're doing long drives. Mints, gum, chips, cookies, fruits, anything, right? And you gotta stop every few hours to use the washroom, maybe get a meal or two. Going through the U.S. was much different. For anyone who hasn't been to the U.S., I'll tell you about it real quick. It's different. I mean, in Canada, it's different because of the culture. The culture is so much different. Everything's very slow paced. Like I said, when you go out west, even when you leave the GTA, like I said, everything is slow paced. So that's different right there. That's the biggest thing, is the pace of life and the lack of diversity. In the U.S., the biggest thing is it looks a lot like Canada, but it doesn't feel like it. If you were born and raised in Canada, or if you've spent in North America all your time in Canada, you'll notice a big difference in the US. There is diversity in the large cities, like when I went to Chicago. Chicago was a lot like Toronto. It looked a lot like Toronto, just a bit smaller and a bit older, but the streets were clean. The streets were so clean. Chicago was beautiful, very beautiful. But the US, everything's bigger. That's one common saying in the US. Everything is bigger. So when I was in the US and I stopped at McDonald's for a coffee, iced coffee. I got so many iced coffees on my drive. I wanted a small. They didn't even have small. They had medium or large, 2 sizes. And so I got a medium. And the size medium was a large sized. Actually, it was like an extra large size if they had that in Canada. It was huge. The servings, massive. And so if you like eating food, visit the US. And I was just driving through the Midwest states. I can't even imagine the South. Like Texas, they say everything's bigger in Texas. So different states have different, like, I guess, cultures in the US, but overall, everything's bigger. The food is amazing. Huge portions. I was eating breakfast in Chicago, and the size of the fork, guys, the fork for my eggs, it was a steak fork. It was a huge fork. I was just eating eggs. So that was nice. The serving size, I love food. So eating in the US was very nice compared to in Canada. That's for sure. And everything's cheaper. Once you convert to US dollars, it's pretty cheap in the US. Gas was cheaper. Food was cheaper. And it's the other difference though, you'll hear people say this, is that Canadians are nicer. That's true. I remember I was getting gas in the US, and you know how when you're in Canada, one typical interaction when you're like buying food or buying something from the store, you're like, hello, thank you, yep, this is what I'm getting, thank you, okay, total's gonna be $6.20, okay, thank you, debit, thank you, you tap, and they're like, thank you, receipt, no thank you, okay, bye, thank you. So it's like 8 thank yous in one interaction. I remember I was getting gas in the US and went inside to pay with my credit card. I think I said thank you like 3 times. And the last time she was like, you're welcome. She said it like, you're welcome. Like she was annoyed that she had to say you're welcome. So definitely realize that, yeah, you don't have to be so nice in those micro interactions. You don't have to say thank you. In Canada, it's just kind of like the culture to act polite and say these things, have those manners. In the US, you don't really need that. Not to say you're a meaner person, but it's not commonplace to say a bunch of please, thank you, and all those small things. So she seemed annoyed to have to say you're welcome to me. So that was funny. But yeah, going through the border was fine for the most part. US was nice. It was cool to come back through the US. It was faster. It was faster to go through the US. So if you're driving out west to Canada, in the GPS it'll say go through the US, but if you want that Canadian experience, you'll go north around the Great Lakes in Ontario, which was a long drive, but it was worth it. It was worth it. So I really hope this breakdown of my driving and the different things I saw really kind of gave you a perspective. The last thing I guess I didn't talk about is the First Nations. I did tell you that I saw some people and saw some reserves. The reserves were kind of crazy. I mean, when you drive past a reserve, it's a reserve. It's just like little house and nothing around it. Over there, another little house, nothing around it. Little house, nothing around it. It was just, all the houses were kind of like, it was kind of eerie. I didn't see any people. I just saw the houses, which was creepy. I think I saw 3 dogs run across the road. No people in the reserves. So, yeah, it was, and then the gas station there, was called the Boy Pumping Chief Station, which I was like, I need gas, but not that bad. So I did not really stop at the reserves, but it's just it's obviously kind of sad to see how the First Nations people kind of live in their reserves. But I mean, when you get to see it, at least you have the perspective of seeing what it's like, because the reserves are very much out in the middle of, just out in random areas. I think I saw this reserve was in Saskatchewan, but there were a lot in Saskatchewan and Manitoba. A lot. So I feel like they don't really allocate a lot of funds to areas with a lot of First Nations, and they kind of live there. So I can't imagine what it'd be like as a First Nations coming to like Ontario and trying to thrive, because it's so much different in Ontario. We live so fast paced here. It's like I'll go over my biggest takeaway. I really will, because I think my truest biggest takeaway, if someone were to ask me, what is the number one thing you've learned from doing this road trip, is that I love Ontario. As much as I can appreciate the whole country now, it was amazing to see the whole country, especially the landscape, especially seeing the different, like the plains, so beautiful. Ontario and going through the trees and the different rock formations, beautiful. I mean, the Rocky Mountains, obviously that's the most beautiful area. I found the best place in the whole world. I stopped at this little canyon area, this little valley area. Beautiful. So that's a big takeaway, is that the country is so beautiful. But also, I like Ontario. I love living in Ontario. I know we have our own problems here. Like, for example, the cost of living in Ontario is super expensive. It is. Compared to the rest of the country, like if you want to go out west, I guess there's less taxes. I guess you can buy a home more like easier. So yeah, I mean, living in Ontario is tough because you have to afford it. You might pay rent. You might do that just to survive, and you have to kind of watch your spending. But overall, the quality of life here and the different foods we have, the different places we have, the different people, the ethnic diversity, these things I would never, ever trade. Because in the US, you don't feel like you belong there. You really don't. And in the rest of Canada, there's not enough happening to feel like you really want to be there long term, unless you can settle for like being out west. If you can settle for the lifestyle, all the power to you. But it made me appreciate that all the problems we have in Ontario, they're problems I would rather put up with. Because living here, seeing all the people, seeing all the things you have to do here, I felt like I was missing out on what was going on in Ontario so badly. So I didn't get homesick really, but I was happy to be back. I did miss the pace of life, all the different things we have here. I did miss it. And so when you leave the province, you'll realize why so many people come here specifically, because you can find people that are similar to you, and also finds all the resources and community and the different, I guess, tourist attractions, school, education, work, everything is here. And I would not live anywhere else in North America unless I was willing to sacrifice all the benefits we have from being here. So it made me appreciate this a lot. And I hope you get a chance to experience the rest of Canada, guys. I really hope you do. If you're planning on doing a road trip across Canada, I mean, reach out to me, please, because I'd love to offer you some more, I guess, advice or perspective. If you've done a road trip across Canada, I'd love to hear how it went for you. Because for me, it went perfect. There were some hiccups, but I'm so lucky I made it. I'm so lucky I made it there and back, because there were some trouble points. There were. So I'd love to hear from you guys about your experiences or thoughts about a road trip across Canada. And I hope this episode kind of served you in a way. Like I said, if you just care about me, I hope you enjoyed listening and hearing my stories. If you are interested in doing this kind of trip yourself, I hope this kind of motivated you. I mean, I'd always been thinking about doing this trip, but this is a time in my life where I said, you know what? Work is like my work, because I'm self-employed. I have the chance to make this time. I'd been saving up. I'd been mentally preparing, and I obviously prepared all the Airbnbs and everything, like I said. So it was time to do it, and I made it happen, and I'm so glad I did. Like I said, it was the drive of my life. So I'm so excited for wherever I drive next. I don't think anything will compare to this drive. Nothing will. So I hope you enjoyed listening to this. I really do. I'm excited to get back into the swing of things with this podcast and with, health, wealth, relationships. That's all we talk about in this community. So I'm really excited to get a chance to focus on my health more as work becomes a little bit more stable for me, and my relationships with you guys. Come on, like the relationship with you guys, just checking in with you guys 3 episodes a week. I'm excited to get back onto that. So make sure you're subscribed, like I said, so you're tuned in to what episodes we have coming up. And I hope you enjoyed this one. All right, so I'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much for listening and enjoying. And I'll see you guys later, all right? This has been Vibing Out with Texony. I'm your host with the most, Texony, aka Mr. World Vibe, and I'm signing out. Peace.